Today we're talking to someone who wanted to be an architect growing up. Instead, he decided to pretend to be an architect by making sets on TV. We're talking to a production designer today on the Fly Filmmaking.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Hey everyone, I am Marielou Mandl, your host here on the Fly Filmmaking, and I've got a fabulous guest with me, Erik Carlson, but we're just going to go by Erik Carlson.
Please.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he told me that his parents named him Philip, and then now...
Never once gone by Philip.
Never gone by Philip.
Nope.
Nope. All right, cool. Then Erik Carlson, thank you for joining me. He is a production designer for lots of really fun projects. Most recently out is Manhunt Unabomber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or is it Unabomber Manhunt?
Manhunt Unabomber.
Manhunt Unabomber. Yeah, the trailer for that looks amazing. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later, but I want to know a little bit more about you first.
Great.
Awesome. So you're a production designer. Tell the kids at home what it is a production designer does.
Basically, a production designer is responsible for the overall look and feel of a show. Generally, I'm responsible for everything that is not an actor that you see on a show or a movie.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's like building the sets, building props, and like
Colors, we work with the special effects guys, stunts, visual effects, coordinate with location managers, props, construction, paint, set deck.
Do you coordinate with the wardrobe as well?
Yes, but usually that's more, at least with everything I've done in television, it's been more about coordinating colors and make sure that we're not clashing looks. And, you know, that the style that I'm choosing for a set matches the style that they're working with for the wardrobe.
Awesome. So then if you guys are making your films at home, your production designer is just going to help make your stuff right. So when I've done production design for like 48-hour film festivals, I'm like, I'm making this bedroom look like a police station.
Yeah, it's very.
Print some stuff out online. You get crazy.
That 1 hour drama is no different.
Yeah,
it's, you know,
awesome.
It's going quick, and you're trying to coordinate as much as you can between wardrobe, the cinematographer, the director, the writer, and trying to group that all together as quick as you can.
Yeah, I remember for like one project, we just it was really important for us to have a sand. What's the time thing? An hourglass. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The sand thing. The sand thing that tells the time. You know, it's like a watch. No, an hourglass. And it was so important for the story. And I was like, I have no idea where to get this. So I went to like every thrift store in Burbank and found one. But yeah.
That's why it helps having a team.
Yes.
Because I don't know where to find any of those things.
So you have somebody else who does that for you. All right. Well, then that's awesome. You've done lots of really fun projects. Another recent one is Six, which is a Navy SEAL show. Awesome. Grandfathered. State of Affairs, Neighbors, and Desperate Housewives. Yeah, so that's
long time on Desperate Housewives.
A long time on Desperate Housewives.
All 8 years.
All 8 years. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you can find Erik on social media. That's usually run by somebody else, but that's okay. I don't judge you for that.
I'm almost still entirely a holdout. If it weren't for my wife, I would be basically a complete holdout.
Oh, awesome.
Still a
Well, I'm
Facebook
so glad
holdout.
that you're doing it. Especially as a production designer, I love seeing Instagram accounts of production designers because you can see things in different stages. You can see what their work is like before and middle and after.
I feel like you've spoken with my wife about this.
Yes. I think I like sell Instagram to everyone who comes onto my show because that's how I communicate with the world. So you can find him at P. Erik Carlson on Instagram. So I would love to know how you got into this industry.
Almost by accident.
Yeah, that's something we hear all the time.
Yeah,
People are like,
it's true.
I just kind of stumbled upon it.
No, you mentioned before, I went to college for architecture, and my senior year in college, I took a film class just to fill credits. And the instructor in that for our final project told me that I should focus on something about architecture similar to production design. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the word production design.
Yeah.
So he had me do a project basically following an actual building being built from beginning to end and how that related to a set being built. And at the same time, it was senior year in architecture school, and I was learning, I was memorizing code and learning how to size plumbing and air conditioning systems, and I hated every second of it.
Yeah.
And found out that there was such a thing that, you know, you do it once, you build it, it stays up for a couple of months, and then it's on back then film forever.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of that of building something and having it last as long as, you know, the media lasts.
As the media lasts. You're
Yeah.
right. So like you didn't come up in the theater.
Not at all, though my mom was very involved in theater growing up. So she always had us going. I almost never did anything behind the scenes. A little bit in school theater, but that was more just helping out. My brother was a little bit more involved in theater, so I would help him basically building sets, but with no intention of making it a career by any means.
Right, yeah, because that's how I was first introduced to set building or building things that are temporary and like you don't need to have all the pieces, was being in theater. And they're like, hey, Marielou, build these stairs. And I was like, yes, awesome. Let's do it. You know?
First time building stairs?
Yeah, was like in college. Well, because they like usually they would send the weaker seeming people to go paint a wall.
Sure.
And I was like, you know, I didn't know, I was like new, and they're like, you seem a little smarter, here's a drill. I'm
A little less weak. It's great.
give me the drill, give me the saw, let's make some stuff.
No lawsuits.
No lawsuits, it was college. We were like, we had to do it for class. It was really great. So you've done a few different things in art department. So accidentally getting into this, so you, in school, found out about production design, and then what got you starting to work in this industry?
It actually took a little while after school. I was a ski bum for a while after that,
Yeah.
and built log cabins in Crested Butte, Colorado. And it just sort of worked out. A couple of friends were moving to Los Angeles at the same time, so I figured that was a good opportunity to try my hand at this and see what it was like. And got very lucky when I first got here and showed my architecture portfolio to a production designer at coffee one day, and I got a job with him on a pilot that started about a month later.
Nice.
And
Well, then
I hooked
before
up
we
with
go
him.
too far, how did you get that coffee meeting with this guy?
One of those random associations through your parents or talking to parents' friends at it might have even been a Christmas party, honestly, where they said they thought they knew someone who knew someone who knew someone that did something like that
Right.
in either film or television. They weren't sure, but here, I'll track down his number for
Right.
you, and if you go down there, give him a call. I did, and this person turned out eventually to be the president of the Art Directors Guild. So it turned out to be an incredible and lucky association, and I basically worked as more or less my mentor for almost 10 years.
That is fabulous, but that came about because you were telling people who were so far removed what you wanted to do.
Yes, and that actually, it took a little bit longer. It wasn't that quick. Again, this was almost exactly 20 years ago, so it wasn't quite as quick as that. I'm sure, knowing me, it probably took a little bit of time once I got down here to actually use the phone and give him a call.
Right.
Because I didn't know what the association really was. I just thought it was a random friend of my parents, so I didn't, as you do when your parents give you advice, I didn't jump on it right away.
Right.
So I worked on a bunch of different things before I
Right.
really met up with him.
Because it's like Uncle Joe's frat brother's cousin or whatever. I don't know if I want to go meet with this dude.
They really didn't know what he did. They knew that he did something in television, and they weren't exactly sure what. They thought it might have something to do with sets.
Yeah.
They had no idea.
No idea that he was the actual guy to talk to.
Nope.
To get you a job, which is so great. So what is it that you were telling people when like they made the connection to kind of connect you with this guy?
Basically, I used the words production design at a party with your family in Seattle, Washington. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of blank looks of not knowing what that was at all. But
Right.
basically, just told them that I wanted to get into film and figure out a way to design sets for film.
Yeah.
And that's honestly how it came across.
That's so great.
Just one of the family friends saying, "Wait a second,
I think I know
I think
a guy.
I may know somebody. I'll try and track down their number for you."
So great. And people are so willing to help you when you like, but I do think it's important. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, whatever it is, like it might not be the thing that you sign on to do forever, but keep telling people that you're interested in this. Like you want to work in film, you want to do this, you're not quite sure, but you want to do this. Like keep plugging that in and it'll trigger to somebody.
Well, I'd say the more people you talk to and tell, absolutely the better.
Yeah.
And working on anything. I think the best advice I got when I first got down here was to check some of the bulletin board listings. I'm sure it's all online now, but at basically every university in town, especially the ones that had film school like USC and UCLA, and seeing what film students were making films at the time, and if they needed a designer, since that wasn't usually an avenue that they went into in college, so they were usually looking for a wardrobe designer or a production designer, because it was all, the school was pretty much all directors or cinematographers. So they would be looking for people not in school to come help them out.
Right.
So I did several of those, at least 6 of those, and it was just a great way to sort of build an initial network of people not knowing anyone in town.
Yeah, and I like that, just the concept of going to the different schools that are around you and reaching out to the other people who might be able to use your services, or you can team up with. So if you're not in LA and you don't have like access to like all the filmmakers and everybody who wants to work on film, like you go anywhere here and everybody wants to work on film. But if you are, you know, in the middle of America and there's like, it's you and your one buddy, I promise you there's other people who want to work on it. So go to the schools, see who you can drum up.
I would absolutely guarantee that everyone's making something. My friends and I growing up made a bunch of very juvenile movies.
Yeah.
We still watch them almost annually to this day.
That's so
There's
great.
a couple that we still watch and make fun of each other about.
What are they about? I wish we had that to show.
Oh man, there's.
Aaron, do you have it, or do you have them?
We actually do have it, because I just found it. I just went. 2 of my closest friends from growing up also live down here, and are actually also in the business, totally unrelated field. And it was they're both getting married, and they're both eloping, so we went on their double bachelor party this past weekend, and so we took the video down with us to view it while we were in Mexico.
That's wonderful. Okay, so how old were you guys when you made this?
I was probably 7th grade.
Okay, and
Might
what
have
was
been
your
8th
role
grade.
in it?
Everybody had every role.
Yes.
So
Just like real
you
life.
acted, you were holding the boom, you were holding the camera, and we shot it all. And again, this was nearly 30 years ago. Is that true? Yeah, it was nearly 30 years ago. So we shot it, the movie that we keep watching, we shot all in camera. No editing, so it was all shot in sequence.
Yeah.
It is a gem. Called Frank. It's mostly an action movie.
Okay.
There's a lot of, it's basically a sequence of stunts. It's not really, it doesn't have the most linear storyline, I would say.
And that's okay, because when you start, you're not good at things.
Definitely, and still none of us are writers. So, and that's pretty apparent from Frank.
But that's good. But you tried it out, right? You tried it out, and that's where, like, I always suggest that people go and try it out. And like, I hate to be like that adult, but I'm like, you kids have it so easy.
No, but
you've got a camera in your pocket. You can edit on an app. You know, I remember filming where I'm like, okay, first we have to do this scene, and we have to cut right away. Oh, it wasn't good. Rewind the tape. Do it again.
Start recording, re-recording over your initial thing.
Yep.
Yeah, out of the 5 of us that made that, 4 of us are actually in the film business.
Yeah.
So one's a cinematographer, I'm a production designer, one's a producer, one's in finance.
Okay, so at least you can get your thing funded.
Yeah. Nope.
All right, so when is your reunion project?
That's funny. That's a good question. We talk every once in a while about making a sequel to Frank.
Oh my gosh, yes, you guys definitely should do it. If you guys at home that are listening or watching want to see this reunion film, maybe Eric will give it to me and I'll post it up on the blog. But if you want to see this, then get to him on Instagram and let him know. And if you guys are listening to this podcast, make sure you do subscribe on iTunes and give us 5 stars if you're into that. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. You into YouTube videos yet? Because you're on one now.
Well, yes. I like them because I have a very short attention span.
Yeah.
And so they work perfectly to the amount of time that I want to watch just a scene. But they also work great for, I use YouTube videos all the time for research.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great resource. So, yeah, while we're on that, what are some resources that you have for production designers or people who are needing to design their own productions but are not production designers?
I don't even remember how we did it without the interwebs.
Yeah.
But I remember we used to, when I started out in the business, basically one of my first jobs in the art department was to go to, there was an archives library in Burbank. And
a library?
Seriously, it was nuts. This lady had basically had cutouts of almost every advertisement for the last 50 years. She had architectural books, of course, but it would be magazines, anything that was visual, they had clippings. So you would go to her and say, hey, we are designing such and such a set. What sort of visual reference do you have? And she would come back with a folder full of newspaper, magazine clippings, and those would be the visual references that we would use, or I would bring back to the production designer. So that process would take, days, if not weeks. Now, of course, it's a lot of Google image searches.
Yeah.
When I start a project, I definitely I still love hardcover books. So when I start a project, I'll usually go to a bookstore that are still around and buy hardcover books to use as a visual reference. I watch a lot of movies on the subject when I start a project. And online videos, also documentaries.
Yeah, there's so much at our disposal very quickly.
I don't know, you can't do this job as quick a pace as as production is now.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it, but just sort of having constant visual input as much as I can possibly take in.
Yeah. So, and then I see from your career, you've done, there's narrative, like fiction, but then now like this new one, the Manhunt Unabomber, is based off of reality. So how is that kind of different for you?
Well, I think there's more similarities than there are differences. I think the process of starting it out is very the same. Finding references is very similar. But I think as a production designer, just having a solid base of knowledge, and not specifically about architecture, but honestly you have to know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
You have to pretend to be an expert about the CIA, the FBI, Navy SEALs, suburban housewives, puppets.
So many different things. So I want to talk about Manhunt Unabomber. So let's get into that, and I would like to watch the trailer so everybody can kind of get a visual, if you're watching this on YouTube, of what this show looks like.
Nice.
It's iconic. The most famous police sketch in history is the Unabomber.
The terrorist called Unabomber is planning to blow up an airliner sometime during the next 6 days.
He's targeting airlines, scientists, computers, forestry people.
We have done every kind of victimology. His victims are totally random.
That profile is wrong. He's lonely. He's smart, extremely precise. He feels underappreciated, victimized, and he's angry. You figure out the philosophy, you can figure out the man, you can crack the code.
An operation of this size and scale is unprecedented. We believe it to be a singular opportunity to lure the Unabomber into the light.
You have the full support of the DOJ.
All I have to do is write your name on a box. And I can reach out and touch anyone, anywhere. If a box comes with your name on it, you can't even imagine doing anything other than obey.
The FBI recommendation is that we publish the manifesto.
He's been outsmarting us the whole time.
Everybody's wrong except for you.
I know him like I know myself.
We need a guilty plea from Ted. This is our only shot. You're our only shot.
Manhunt Unabomber, an 8-episode event, starts Tuesday, August 1st at 9 on Discovery and the Discovery Go app.
Awesome. That looks so good. So first I want to say I'm like super excited that like Discovery Channel's making original content.
No kidding.
Like there's so much work for people like wanting to get into this. So like get out there and like do it, because
it's different than it was 10 years ago.
They're making stuff all the time.
Everybody is. Every network is making original scripted content, so it only benefits those behind the scenes.
Yeah. So if you want to do it, get into it. There's
Absolutely.
work. You know, be good at it so you can.
6 is on History Channel.
Yeah.
That's Discovery Channel. So no, between that, Amazon, Netflix, it's
Everything.
amazing how many outlets there are.
Well, now like AT&T is making original content. Like
Apple.
Everybody is making original content. This mug is making original content.
It's great for us.
Yeah. So with this, I loved that there's two different things that for you I feel like was a really fun challenge. There's so many different types of sets. So you've got like homes, you've got offices, you've got outdoors, you've got things like that. Plus it's a period piece. Yeah. So tell me about how you felt when you first got this assignment.
Well, first off, I was sad to find out that 1995 is a period time.
Yes.
But it unfortunately is
real.
now.
It's real.
But it's surprising, again, doing research, how similar but how different, especially technologically, how different everything is. And we absolutely want to make everything as accurate as possible for the whole show, not just for the documents that Ted Kaczynski had, but for the FBI offices. And we had great technical advisors that basically kept reiterating that computers were not that prevalent in the offices in 1995.
Yeah.
That it was basically an entire office would have to share 2 or 3 that were along the perimeter. So it was details like that we really wanted to get right. And it was still a paper society, and everyone had typewriters on their desks and not computers. So it was finding things like that out from our actual technical advisors that helped us a ton with the FBI offices. Having the actual James Fitzgerald on, who was the character that Sam Worthington plays, he helped us out with more of the aspect that he dealt with Ted in Ted's cabin, and then also the environment that Ted grew up in. What you don't get in the clip is one of the episodes we do sort of an origin story of Ted Kaczynski.
Okay.
So predominantly the show takes place between 95 and 97, but one whole episode goes back to Ted's youth in outside of Chicago in the mid-50s. I think it was 55 or 56.
Yeah.
So we showed that, and we show Harvard in the 60s, and then up to him going to Montana in the 70s.
Wow, you had so much to play with. And how many episodes is this?
It is 10 episodes.
10 episodes. So you had like just so much to work with, where
a lot of content.
I would think with like Desperate Housewives probably had like a core of some locations, and you like sometimes get to build something else, but it's all really in the same world.
Pretty much. And that one was a totally different luxury in that we shot almost the entire show at Universal Studios. So we had, it kept growing year after year, but we had about 6 different stages. And then on the back lot of Universal is Colonial Street, which was our Wisteria Lane, and we had, I think it's 13. It was either 13 or 15 houses up there. Only about 4 of them actually have interiors, and we built about 4 additional houses up there. So that one was unique in that we really were sort of contained onto a studio lot, and the show kind of got so big that it made it more and more difficult for us to leave the lot and go to locations.
Oh, right,
if
because
we had
it's
to
so
go to a dry
popular.
cleaners, and just the amount of equipment that it takes to film with 5 leading ladies. It became overwhelming to find parking that we can afford. So
you're just like, just build something.
we would build a salon instead of going to a salon to film there.
Okay.
So we built a lot on that show.
Yeah, and then with this one, you guys, where were you guys shooting?
So this one, Unabomber was entirely shot in Atlanta, or just outside of Atlanta.
Okay, and you mentioned you've been like away from him for like 2 years?
2 years. Just got home a week ago after
welcome back.
a little over 2 years away.
Yeah, that's also something you'll learn as you get more into the industry, is that you move to LA to not stay here.
I got pretty lucky. The first 16 years or so, I don't think I didn't have a single. I had one location show, but that was in Northern California on the Majestic. But that's it. Every other show I did somehow. Of course, when you're single and want to travel for work, every show I worked on was here. And then now married, of course, it's every show, every script I've been getting lately is all for outside of town.
Yeah, but that's also, I think, because of budgets and how much they're like producing stuff now.
Completely.
They're like, okay, let's go to all these other locations that have tax incentives to go film, and it's great.
Why,
so a lot of this you built sets, but were they a mix of sound stages and actual locations?
On Unabomber, yeah. We actually we didn't have a traditional soundstage in Atlanta because there are some, but there are more productions in Atlanta than there are sound stages.
Yeah.
It's a very busy town because of those tax incentives that you talked about.
Yeah, like the last time I was there, like I think every time that I go there, there's shooting on the street.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Every time. Like they were doing Ant-Man 2 last time I was there.
I think when we were there, I'm probably going to get this wrong, I believe there's either 35 or 42 productions going on at once in Atlanta. And that also includes commercials, but it makes it very tricky to find crew and find sound stages. So we converted a lot of the show. We filmed at a shutdown military base.
Oh, okay.
Just south of Atlanta called
Right
Fort McPherson. So most of those FBI offices we converted to basically built within an existing building. There was a couple 100,000 square feet of office space. So we built walls and we adapted it to work for our needs for the show. So all the FBI offices were there. We converted the basement areas into our prison for Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah.
And then there were some larger sort of atrium spaces that we made into sound stages, and we built versions of Ted's cabin. We actually had a few different versions of Ted's cabin. So we had a stage version of Ted's cabin so that we could pull walls, and it was about 10% bigger than the full interior exterior of the cabin that we built out in the woods.
Gotcha. Okay, well, we've got a few photos for reference from the show, so I wanted to talk about what we might be looking at here. And if you guys are just listening on the podcast, then you can go to Erik's Instagram to see a lot of photos from the show. So this
is one of the versions of
the cabin,
of Ted's cabin. So this is the version, I believe, just because it's a little bit tighter. So the version that we built out in the woods was to the dimensions that the FBI took in evidence documents. So that was, again, research was paramount with this because we wanted to be dead on accurate with everything that was Ted's cabin.
Right, not like because it's not inspired by, like you wanted it to be right.
And it's such an iconic, especially for sort of my generation. It was. You might not know what Ted Kaczynski looks like. You not really know what the manifesto was, but everyone sort of has a visual of what the cabin was.
Right.
And if they didn't, people would go online to look and see what the real thing was.
Yeah.
And find, a lot of the FBI evidence photos are out there available to be seen. And the University of Michigan has basically every document that the FBI had, every evidence photo, all of Ted's letters to his parents, to his brother. So they have all that. And so we were able to they have a special archives. So we were able to get all of those photos and basically recreate every little piece of evidence in his cabin, down to shoes that he used that he had made with separate soles on the bottom so that he could go to neighbors' houses and steal stuff out of their house. And if they tried to track footprints, it would be, a women's size shoe. So he was, a very clever guy. But luckily,
clever guy. Wow.
We had all these bits of evidence and separate photos, with the FBI ruler, so we knew exactly what size. So we had a whole set deck crew that did nothing but just build everything that was in that cabin.
Yeah, awesome. So what is this one that we're looking at here?
So this is Ted's cell when he was awaiting trial before he was convicted. So predominantly, our main prison set was sort of hallways and a big common area that led up to Ted's cell, where he was basically held before and during trial. And then we built a separate cell at the very end. Spoiler alert, he was found guilty. So we built a separate cell in the Supermax prison that he is still held in Colorado.
Wow. That's and like what I think is so fun about these historical shows.
That was the stage set.
Oh, that last photo?
That was, again, not really on stage.
Oh.
And then that's the version. So we built a little bit smaller version of the cabin that we were able to travel with us, one that we had to have hanging from a helicopter being transported.
Wow.
And then it had to be lowered from a helicopter down onto a flatbed truck. And we had to make it about 10% smaller than the real thing so that it could fit under bridges in Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And into a mall.
And why did it need to be transportable?
Because we were recreating, in actuality, the Ted's defense transported his cabin to outside of San Francisco as part of the trial.
They really did move his cabin around.
That was a real thing. So we went off of newspaper clippings of the actual cabin being transported from Montana to California.
Yeah, and that I think is so fascinating. I have a lot of friends who are really into true crime stuff, and watching that stuff now, like I guess if you were into true crime before the internet, you know, you could watch something and you're like, great, I want to learn more. Let me go to the library, get some special books. Now, like, you can just immediately be like, oh my God, what was that about? What happened here?
It seems like everyone's now creating a show about it, whether it's OJ, the Menendez brothers,
it's just
the
like
Unabomber.
super fascinating. Awesome. So are these two different cabins?
Yes, no, this is one in the same cabin. So we needed a cabin for James Fitzgerald. After the trial was over, he himself somewhat became a recluse. And he very much bought into a lot of Ted's philosophy and beliefs. And so he wanted to get away from all technology as well. So he actually disappeared. The show makes a little bit of a jump. We said he kind of moved into the woods outside of San Francisco, sort of near Shasta. In actuality, he kind of went on the beach in New Jersey, but he still became a recluse. So we found a cabin outside of Atlanta that looked a little bit too much like the American South, so we converted it into a cabin that looked like it was more in the Northwest.
So which one is the one that was
used? So the top one is the one that we first found when we were scouting.
Okay.
And then we restained it, built a fake river rock foundation and fake shake wood shingle roofing for the top.
And then like there's grass there now?
Yeah.
Did you guys put that there?
That was somewhat the transition of time because we first went scouting in the almost exactly a year ago.
It had to be like winterish.
It was December or January when we found this cabin of last year, and then we actually didn't film the cabin until I want to say April of this year.
Oh, that's so
fascinating. So it was a little ways longer because we shot we had the same director for all 8 episodes. So we block shot, which basically just means that we
shoot the season like a movie?
Like a movie.
Yeah.
So we combined locations that would be in episode 1, 3, 5, 7. And shot them all at once.
Yeah.
So it's spread out over, which made it significantly more difficult preparing the entire season in the same amount of time that you usually have to prep a pilot episode.
Okay.
So it was
really fast
challenging.
turnaround.
Yeah, it was very
So
quick.
you got brought onto this project when?
About 5 days before I flew to Atlanta to start working on it.
Yeah. So like last fall?
Yeah, I was last November.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
and
home for 3 days. Is that right?
Yeah.
Nope. I was home for about 3 weeks.
Okay, 3
between
weeks.
the end of season 1 of 6 and then interviewed for this show. And 5 days later, was on a plane to Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta for 7 months.
Yeah.
So it was pretty quick. Usually, you have a little bit more notice before starting a show, but this one just worked out that way.
Would you say on the fly?
A little bit on the fly.
A little bit on the fly, like everything else in filmmaking. It just all kind of is like go. You just got to be ready when the opportunity's there. Yes.
Completely adaptable.
Which is just so wonderful. So I see here we've got some photos laid out on the ground.
Yes.
So so I know you guys do the sets. Are you like props like that? Is that in your realm as well?
That's me on my knees laying everything out for the shot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So yes, again, it's all we did not want to have any threat of using actual FBI photos in any of the scenes. So every piece of evidence we recreated and then took photographs ourselves so that we had our own FBI evidence photos of it. But every word of every document, the guy in the top left there is our assistant art director, Bill, who recreated every letter that Ted Kaczynski wrote. And he recreated the manifesto. He took a sample of Paul Bettany's handwriting and created a Paul Bettany Ted Kaczynski font.
What?
And recreated every letter in Paul Bettany's handwriting.
Oh my gosh, that's like so fancy.
It was extensive, but our director he knew he was going to be doing extreme close-ups on every shot like this. That he wanted everything to be accurate and he had spent years working on this project, so he would know every letter.
Right. Yeah, and sort of like details matter. So then, like, so I love this. Then the concept of, because of this being historical and like these documents being so important, like you put a lot of focus onto that. Where for something else, you may not. You could just say like gibberish.
Well, the show was about words.
Yes.
And it really was about the way they caught Ted was through linguistic analysis. So not the most exciting thing to show. It's not really action involved other than Ted's bombings. So we want to try and make a show about breaking down words and comparing words from letters and a manifesto interesting. And by doing that, Greg Utanesar, the director-producer, really wanted to do extreme macro lens work so that you saw word for word the comparative analysis.
Wow. Yeah, so then it becomes a little bit more interactive, I guess, for the audience, because they're doing the work that was done.
And it makes it feel a little bit bigger. You know, we had a version of Ted's typewriter that you could take apart, and basically the snoot of the lens could be in there with each key that was going down there. So it felt bigger. You know, when the snoot's in there, it feels like the inside of a typewriter is the size of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
So it gives a little scale to something that is, you know, small and minute and might be overseen normally.
And is this something that the directors or the DP are discussing with you ahead of time? Like, you know, they're like, I know we want this, my vision is this, so you need to adapt to create this for them.
Early on in prep, the writer, the producer, the cinematographer, and I would basically have meetings coming up with a style and a look and figuring out how we were going to be able to do this, and if this made the most sense of making something so small feel grand, and basically going through those talks for the first, you know, week or two of really coming up with a concept for the whole idea and the look of the show.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so much fun to learn what all the different departments do and then how they come together. So then you, as the production designer, are like the head of that department. So what are some of the other roles in that department? So you mentioned the guy who made the font. What did he do?
So he was assistant art director.
Okay.
And then we had a graphic designer that basically recreated you know, every graphic or sign or newspaper needed from 1956 to 95 to 97. And then I had an art director that really helps me oversee everything, and then really does most of the work of coordinating between all the different departments with grip, electric, stunts, special effects, so that the design that I come up with works for their needs as well, so that we know that if we have to have gunshots, that a wall behind me can be squibbed, and so that's not solid, or it's not tile, or it's not something that might hurt an actor if a squib goes awry. So he basically helps me directly with construction and paint and set deck and every other department. So they have a lot of responsibility in their job.
How many people were on your team?
On that show, there was probably an art department of about 7 people, and then in set deck you have probably another 15, including the set dressers. In construction, you probably have about another 15, and then in paint, you probably have about 7 or 8.
There's so many jobs to be
There's
had.
a lot, yeah.
And then you, I can see like from your history, like you've come up through the art department. So what was the first job that you had? Like that pilot that you were working on?
Yeah,
you were in art department?
that was after working for free for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, again, and building up a network, as big a network as you can possibly do. You still tell people today, even with production assistants, it's always kind of a known fact to be good to production assistants, because you never know that one day that production assistant might be your producer or director or writer. So building as big a network early on as you can. Be happy to work for free starting out, because that's going to be the best way to get on a lot of shows. And then, you know, early on, I had great advice. Someone told me never say no to a project.
Oh, okay.
And so I worked on, that's for good and bad. You're going to work on some stuff that you might not necessarily be proud of, but it was work, it was experience, and it built up a knowledge base. So it's always going to be good experience, even if the show might not be exactly what you had always envisioned working on when you first started getting out. But yeah, definitely not saying no to just about anything. So I did that for a long time. And then, you know, from there it's choosing projects that scare you.
Yeah. What's a project that scared you?
Every one of them.
Every single one.
Pretty much at the beginning. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
you know, and in it'll always happen that you'll have a choice between two projects. It's the way of the world. It's Murphy's Law that you'll be looking for work for a while, and then two things will crop up at once, and you'll have to choose between the two. And one will feel more comfortable, and the other one will scare you. And if I've ever had a philosophy, my only philosophy is always choose the one that scares you more, that you think is going to be more difficult because you're going to learn more from it.
Yeah, that sounds
and
cool.
It's going to challenge you quite a bit more.
I think that's wonderful advice.
Thank you.
Now, before we get too far away from your history and work, I do want to ask about Team America, because that one had puppets in it. So
Yes,
is that part of your department? Because like you don't typically design the actors.
Well, that one, yeah. We didn't, not the puppets themselves, but because you're dealing with not full-size human beings, everything on every bit of every set has to be built from scratch.
Yeah.
Or adapted. And on that show, we adapted a ton of found objects to use as larger pieces, you know, whether it was making a pitchfork out of a regular scale fork. You know, it's a horrible example, but nothing else is coming to mind right now. But we found a lot of objects. One of the first projects I worked on, so maybe is a better example, we had to create the village outside of Kim Jong-il's palace. And they wanted to do it with all found objects, so I went down to Chinatown here in Los Angeles and bought massive amounts of Chinese food containers and figured out a way to basically make takeout containers look like huts and villages.
That's brilliant.
So we built the entire village surrounding his palace out of fast food containers.
Yeah.
So they wanted basically every set to have that kind of feel, like little sneaky stuff that you might not notice unless you really pause and take a look at it.
Okay.
Close up.
Right, because it's not meant to look like you stacked up a bunch of. It's not supposed to look like a toy set, but it is made out of these found objects.
Certainly some of it was a little bit over the top, but it was meant to be that way. But the set decorator couldn't go down to Home Depot and buy a typical light fixture. We would basically have to create something from scratch. So that one was very tricky in that sense that everything had to be designed and built, and then usually in a couple different scales, from 1/35th scale to 1/3 scale. Most of the puppets were 1/3 scale.
Yeah. Neat. Okay, cool. So then you've done, with that, you were an assistant art director, and then you move up from there into art director. And then from the art director, from what I understand then, so as a production designer, you have art directors under you that kind of execute your vision.
Yeah, exactly.
And then are you the type of production designer that does the drawings, or you're like, this is my vision, somebody else draws it?
Both. Really, honestly, it depends on the timeline. In television, if I'm in prep and there's a little bit more time before we start filming, I'll do almost all of the drawings. Usually I'll do computer three-dimensional drawings of all the main permanent sets, and then I will pass those drawings on to a draftsperson or a set designer who then does all the construction drawings for construction and paint and set deck to work from. So I'll do both. In television, it's happening so fast, especially on shows like Unabomber 6, where a lot of the filming is on location. So we're adapting a lot of locations, but it also means I'm in a scout van for 6 or 8 hours every day, going all over Atlanta, or in the last case, Vancouver, Canada, looking for locations that we can adapt and use for, in the case of Canada, use for Serbia or Bosnia. In the case of North Carolina, use it as Nigeria. So seeing what you can work and adapt with. So time permitting, I like to do drawings, but it always works out on a show that there are a lot of drawings where I literally do a napkin sketch and just rough something out that I can pass off to a set designer, and then it's just as quick as I can explaining what I had in my mind and hoping that they're able to translate that.
Yeah, because it all just moves so fast.
Completely.
So even when you have a big budget, that's where I always really do suggest people try these 48-hour film festivals. Like I've had a lot of friends who are like, oh no, I'm above that. I'm like, no, you're learning so much in just having to make decisions quickly. And the best that you can with the resources that are at hand.
There's, at least in most television, there's almost not time to change. If you pick a wall color, you're not going to have time to change that wall color because it's probably going to be wet when they're filming it.
Yeah.
And it's no better on half-hour television is almost harder because it's every 5 days, so the time crunch is that much more extreme. So no, yeah, it's the quicker you can come up with a decision and stick with it, right or wrong. Absolutely the better.
It's just kind of being decisive, and then like, all right, here it is. That's what it is. So I hear from
and
like
you're going to be wrong a lot.
You're going to be wrong a lot. You just accept that and be like, yeah, all right, then we'll get it better on the next time.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So you were working in Atlanta. You were working in Vancouver. For people who are wanting to work in art department, do you suggest they go to those markets, or are those things being hired from LA?
No. For the most part, they're hired locally first.
Yeah.
So absolutely, and they're both those towns are incredibly busy. There's more production than there are people available to work on them. So, yeah, when I first got to Vancouver, it took me weeks to even find an art department assistant. So I worked in the office by myself for about 3 weeks before the production was able to find anyone to help me out.
Yeah.
So some areas are better, but if you can find a team that'll travel with you, it's difficult to bring them to places, especially Canada, because you do at least have to attempt to hire locally first. Atlanta's the same way. It was so busy in both those areas, at least in Atlanta, I was able to bring the same crew from the first season of Six that was shot in North Carolina. I was able to use most of that crew in Atlanta, so that was great for me.
Yeah,
it's always
that's
nice when you can keep working with the same crew, because having that shorthand with that time constraint is
it's great. Like
more than
and
money.
you're already in a groove because you guys had already worked on a season of something, so you're just already vibing together.
Yep. And like you said, making decisions quick is almost more important than your budget, because budgets are they're never going to be big enough.
Never.
It doesn't matter what show, it doesn't matter how big it is or how small it is. The script is always going to be just a little bit bigger than the budget that you get.
Yeah.
So you work with, that's part of it, is finding that compromise of how do you make it look as good as you can, fitting for the script on the budget and the time that you have.
Yeah. And then with these smaller markets, like, I would think if I were wanting to work in this and I wasn't living in LA yet, then I might choose one of these other markets and look at the productions that are happening there and maybe reach out to those art departments.
Absolutely.
Those production designers and just say, hey, can I come and shadow you?
Yeah,
can I be an
in
intern?
both of those, there's every scale of project, from a small commercial or low budget cable show to big network shows to massive Marvel movies.
Yeah.
So especially Atlanta, there's a lot of work there, and there's a lot of production designers and art directors looking for
a team
local hires.
Yeah, that they probably would love to build somebody who they're like,
Completely.
great, you're local and I can mold you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. No,
Let's go.
I was incredibly lucky with the group that we found in Atlanta. They were bailed me out almost every single day.
Yeah.
So having a good crew, it's worth more than my base knowledge. For
right.
Sure.
So building your network, that's something that you've definitely mentioned a few times. And what other kind of advice do you have for them? Being adaptable.
Being adaptable is a big one.
Yeah.
Being adaptable again to budgets, being adaptable because it's not always about your vision of a project, which is why you have to have a good base of knowledge about sort of all design. Because what I have in my head is not going to be the same thing that the director has in their head, or the writer has in their head, or the cinematographer has in their head, and finding that balance and compromise between how I saw it and how the director saw it is, it's tricky, but it's also the thing that's fun of working with a group of people. It's never easy at first, but then you kind of start finding that balance with each other and finding a trust with each other.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite aspects of being a filmmaker, and like the fact, like I it's no secret to everyone here, like I do a little bit of everything. Like whatever somebody will let me do, I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. Yeah. And what I love the most is being in a crew and like you get close with this group of people in like really weird situations, and there's no other way, like you're not going to have that connection with anyone else, because that thing that you guys did together won't happen again.
It's funny, working on a military show recently, all of our military advisors said this is the closest thing they saw to their experience in the military is finding a group of people that did not know each other, have no association with each other, working solidly and hard for 6 months and then disappearing and finding another group of people and being away from home. But they said this is sort of the closest industry that they felt to their experience in the military.
Yeah, maybe that's why I found filmmaking, because I grew up a military kid.
Oh, no
and
kidding.
I was like, I can't go into the military because I don't like people ordering me around like that. But
sometimes you have to get used to that too.
Yeah, well, that's why I keep moving up. I want to be the boss.
That always helps.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Absolutely.
Lots of really, really amazing information. Is there any other advice you have for creatives, filmmakers, whether they want to do production design or anything else?
I'd say there's no wrong avenue to getting in the business. I don't know. I have not worked with anyone in an art department that went to film school. It's just worked out that way. I definitely know that there are lots of people that have worked, that have gone to film school. I just somehow have not worked with anyone that actually went to film school. So you certainly don't have to go to film school to get into this business. I'd say working hard and being open to working long hours, working overtime, and not getting overtime pay, especially at the beginning. You just have to expect that you're not going to start at the top. You're not going to be the boss right off the bat.
Yeah.
You do. I had a few offers early on in my career to jump to a production designer, and I did not feel I was ready. I felt I needed to get more experience, and I wanted to work my way up sort of step by step by starting as a production assistant in the art department and doing that for a while before getting an art department coordinator job and doing graphics for a long time on shows, and then assistant art director, then art director, and then production designer. I think it helps having that knowledge base because you do know what every department does. And who's responsible for what, and what can be achieved in the timeline that you have.
Yeah, I think that's really, really wonderful advice. So if you guys have any other questions for Erik, find him on Instagram and his wife will answer for you. You can also find information on him on his website, which is PErikCarlson.com. And anywhere else they can find you? Can they come to your house? Can they come hang out?
Yes, they can.
Yeah? Were we fixing some things? No, that's totally fine. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Marielou Mandl. You can find me all over the internet at Marielou Mandl, and we will see you next time on the Fly Filmmaking.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.